You know that feeling when you first move into a new place? At night, you're just bumping into everything, stubbing your toe on stuff you forgot you even had. But after a little while, you know it's really become home when you can navigate the whole place in complete darkness. You know where the walls are. They give you a sense of place, a sense of safety. But what happens when the very things that are supposed to protect us become barriers that just cause pain? Well, that's what we're digging into today.
So that's the big question we're tackling, isn't it? Walls are such a basic part of our lives, but they have this double life. On one hand, they're for protection, but on the other, they're for division. I mean, on one hand, walls are awesome, right? They give us safety, warmth, a private space to build our lives and call home. But then there's the other side of the coin. Walls are what separate us. We build them on borders. And maybe even worse, we build them symbolically, right down the middle of broken relationships. And it's this exact tension that brings us to this idea of a dividing wall of hostility.
To really get a grip on what's lost when we build these walls, we first have to understand the ideal state they shatter. And according to the source material we're looking at, that ideal is all wrapped up in one single, incredibly powerful Hebrew word: shalom. Now, you've probably heard shalom translated as peace. And look, that's not wrong, but it's just scratching the surface. This word shows up more than 250 times in the Old Testament, which tells you it's a huge deal. The real meaning goes so much deeper than just, the absence of conflict.
And this is where we get to that deeper meaning. It's described as a webbing together. Just picture that for a second. It's not just about inner calm. It's a state of complete, thriving connection between God, humanity, and all of creation. A world of justice, fulfillment, and delight. That is the ideal.
Okay, so if that's the ideal, what shattered it? Well, the source text we're exploring today, from the book of Ephesians, gives this barrier a pretty dramatic name: the dividing wall of hostility.
Here it is. This is the key phrase. The writer, Paul, is trying to explain that in Christ something absolutely radical happened. He's claiming that this dividing wall of hostility has been completely destroyed. The language is so powerful, so final, but it kind of makes you wonder.
Was this just some poetic metaphor? I mean, come on, the dividing wall of hostility sounds a little bit like something straight out of a fantasy movie, doesn't it? But here's the thing. This wasn't just a metaphor. It was a real place.
Yep, it was a real, honest-to-goodness physical wall. Back in the 1st century, in the Jerusalem temple, there was a literal barrier that separated the areas where Jewish people could go from the areas where non-Jews or Gentiles were allowed. It was a physical line in the sand, representing a deep social and religious divide.
And believe me, the hostility part wasn't just for show. Archaeologists have actually found pieces of this wall, and the warning carved into them is, well, it's chilling. It says, "No foreigner may enter. Anyone who is caught doing so will have himself to blame for his ensuing death." It doesn't get much more hostile than that.
So if the problem is a literal, deadly wall of division, what in the world is the solution? According to the source, the death of Christ acts as a kind of symbolic demolition, an event that was designed to tear that wall down and create something entirely new in its place.
And the goal here wasn't just destruction. It was this whole 4-step creative process. First, to set aside the specific laws that were creating the division. Second, to create a single new humanity out of the 2 divided groups. Third, to reconcile both of those groups back to God. And finally, to put the hostility itself to death.
So the crucial point here is that this was never just about breaking something down. It was all about restoration. The goal was to bring back that state of shalom we were talking about, that perfect webbing together of God, humanity, and creation.
Okay, so the symbolic wall was torn down 2,000 years ago. What does that mean for us today? The challenge isn't the wall itself anymore. The real challenge is choosing to cross over the rubble it left behind. Now, the source material points to modern examples of this same hostility, like an elected official calling an entire ethnic group garbage. But it's also quick to observe that this kind of thing isn't just one-sided. It notes the dehumanizing idea that MAGA Christians are garbage, or that in some lefty circles the thinking is that MAGA Americans are garbage. The source is incredibly clear on this. From its faith perspective, that kind of hatred is just not tolerable, no matter which side it's coming from.
And this brings us to a really powerful analogy. For decades after the Berlin Wall physically came down, a lot of East and West Berliners still kept to themselves. See, just because the barrier is gone, it doesn't mean reconciliation just happens. People have to actually make the choice to cross over that rubble and engage with the folks on the other side.
And this idea of personal choice is captured perfectly on a piece of the actual Berlin Wall that's now in London. Someone spray-painted a message that was there even when the wall was still standing. It just says, change your life. It's a direct, personal, and powerful call to action. So here it is, the ultimate takeaway from all of this. Theologically speaking, the great dividing wall of hostility has been torn down. The path to reconciliation is, in theory, totally clear. The barrier is gone, the offer of peace is on the table, and the choice is now ours. So the question this leaves all of us with is this: will we cross over the rubble?